The sound of my father's voice echoed through the church like a verdict. "You are dead to me, Lily." He spat the words loud enough for every guest to hear. My veil trembled in my grip as whispers rippled through the pews. Daniel reached for my hand, but my father knocked it away with disgust. "I didn't raise my daughter to marry a man with nothing," he announced to the crowd. Then he turned and walked out, his footsteps thundering against the marble floor. The chapel doors slammed shut behind him, and the silence that followed felt heavier than any words he'd spoken. I stood there frozen, my bouquet shaking in my hands. Petals scattered across the white runner as tears blurred my vision. Daniel squeezed my fingers gently, and somehow, I found my voice. The ceremony continued, but the damage was done. "My name is Lily Warren, and that was the day my father tried to bury me alive, just because I chose love over money." What he didn't know was that his rejection would become the foundation of everything I built. And years later, when he came crawling back, I'd be the one holding all the cards. I grew up in Warren Manor, where every marble column screamed wealth and every dinner conversation revolved around business deals. My father, Thomas Warren, built his real estate empire from concrete and ruthlessness. He believed love was a transaction, marriage a merger, and children were investments that needed managing. Every boy I dated faced his interrogation. Background checks. Financial statements. Family connections. He'd grade them like properties, prime location or tear down. Most ran before dessert was served. The few who stayed did so because they wanted access to Warren money, not to me. My mother played her role perfectly, the silent partner who nodded at appropriate moments and never questioned his decisions. She'd married for security 28 years ago and taught me that comfort was more important than happiness. I learned early that in my father's world, feelings were liabilities. Show emotion, and you showed weakness. Dream of something different, and you were foolish. I spent 18 years trying to be the daughter he wanted, polished, obedient, profitable. Then I met Daniel Hayes, and everything changed. Daniel came to fix the heating system in the Manor's East Wing. I was home from college for winter break, buried in architecture books when I heard hammering downstairs. Curious, I followed the sound to find him kneeling beside a radiator, tools spread around him like a metalworker's prayer. He looked up when I entered, and his smile was genuine, not the calculated charm I'd grown used to from my father's associates. "Sorry about the noise," he said, wiping grease from his hands. "This old system's got character, but she's stubborn." We talked while he worked. He told me about his small firm that specialized in sustainable housing, about designing homes for veterans returning from service, about believing that everyone deserved a safe place regardless of their bank account. I found myself returning each day he worked, bringing coffee and asking questions about his projects. He showed me blueprints on his tablet, affordable housing that didn't look cheap, community spaces that brought neighborhoods together, green technology that made sense. For the first time, I met someone who measured success differently than my father did. When the heating job finished, Daniel asked if I'd like to see one of his completed projects. I said yes without hesitation. He drove me to a neighborhood my father would have called beneath us, a street lined with modest homes painted in cheerful colors, kids playing on front porches, vegetable gardens growing in yards. "This was a vacant lot 2 years ago," Daniel explained as we walked. "We built 12 houses using recycled materials and solar panels. Every family here owns their home, no predatory mortgages, no hidden fees." An elderly woman waved from her garden. "Daniel, come see my tomatoes." He introduced me, and she insisted we take some vegetables home. As we walked back to his truck, arms full of fresh produce, I realized something fundamental had shifted inside me. This was the kind of work that mattered. This was building something real. That night at dinner, I mentioned Daniel casually. My father looked up from his steak, fork paused midair. "The handyman? I hope you're not getting any ideas, Lily. People like that are fine for fixing pipes, not for joining families." I should have recognized the warning in his tone. But I didn't stop seeing Daniel. We kept our relationship quiet for months, meeting at coffee shops across town, taking long drives through neighborhoods he hoped to develop, talking about everything except my last name. He learned I wanted to study urban planning, but my father insisted on business management. I learned he'd grown up in foster care, bouncing between homes until a carpenter took him in and taught him the trade. He understood struggle in ways I never had. "Your father doesn't know?" Daniel asked one evening as we watched the sunset from a construction site. "He'd lose his mind," I admitted. "In his world, you're either useful or you're nobody. And usefulness means having connections, money, or power." Daniel was quiet for a moment. "And which am I?" "You're the first person who's ever made me feel like I matter more than my last name," I said softly. He kissed me then, and I knew I was falling in love with someone my father would never accept. The question was whether I had the courage to choose my own happiness over his approval. The moment of truth came 6 months later. Daniel and I had been dating seriously, and I couldn't hide it anymore. I invited him to Sunday dinner at the Manor, my stomach churning with anxiety as we pulled up the circular driveway. My mother greeted us at the door, her smile tight and professional. "How lovely," she said in that tone that meant the opposite. My father waited in the dining room, already seated at the head of the table like a king granting an audience. "So you're the heating contractor," my father said as we entered. Not a question, a classification. "I'm an architectural engineer, actually," Daniel corrected politely. "I design sustainable housing developments." My father's eyes narrowed. "How profitable is that?" "Profitable enough to help families afford homes," Daniel replied evenly. "That's the real return on investment." I watched my father's jaw tighten. In his world, helping people was code for bad business. The dinner that followed was excruciating, my father asking invasive questions about Daniel's income, family background, and prospects while my mother pushed food around her plate. The interrogation continued through dessert. "What's your net worth?" my father demanded, not bothering with subtlety anymore. "What assets do you bring to the table?" "Because my daughter is accustomed to a certain standard of living." "With respect, Mr. Warren," Daniel said carefully, "Lily isn't a business transaction. We care about each other." My father laughed, that cold, dismissive sound I'd heard him use when rejecting business proposals. "Care? That's adorable. Care doesn't pay for private schools or country club memberships. Care doesn't maintain the lifestyle she deserves." "Maybe I want a different lifestyle," I interjected. The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. My father's attention snapped to me, and I saw something dangerous flash in his eyes. "Excuse me?" "I want to work in urban development," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I want to help people, not just profit from them." "You've been poisoning her mind," my father accused, pointing at Daniel. "Filling her head with these ridiculous romantic notions." "Nobody's poisoning anything," Daniel stood, his calm finally cracking. "Lily's smart enough to make her own choices." My father stood too, and suddenly the dining room felt very small. "Get out," my father said quietly. The words were soft but sharp as broken glass. "Get out of my house." Daniel looked at me, and I saw the question in his eyes. Was I coming with him or staying? I picked up my purse with shaking hands and stood. "I'm going too." "Sit down, Lily," my father commanded. "No." That single word hung in the air like a declaration of war. My mother gasped softly, her hand flying to her chest. My father's face turned crimson, veins bulging at his temples. "If you walk out that door with him," my father said slowly, "you're choosing poverty over family. You're choosing to throw away everything I've built for you. Is that really what you want?" I looked at Daniel, who'd never asked me to choose, who'd only ever wanted me to be happy. Then I looked at my father, who'd never asked what I wanted at all. "Yes," I said. We left. Behind us, I heard my father's roar of rage and something crashing, probably the expensive vase in the foyer. My mother called my name once, weakly, but didn't follow. The next morning, I woke up in Daniel's small apartment to 15 missed calls from my father. I listened to his voicemail on speaker while Daniel made coffee. You've made your choice, my father's voice announced coldly. Don't expect to come crawling back when reality hits. Your accounts are frozen. Your credit cards are cancelled. Your trust fund is gone. You want to play poor? Let's see how you like it. Daniel handed me a mug, his expression worried. Lily, you don't have to do this. Maybe if we wait. No, I interrupted. I'm done waiting for his permission to live my life. But the reality hit harder than I expected. Within days, I discovered just how thoroughly my father controlled everything. My phone was disconnected. My car, registered in his name, was towed. My apartment near campus was lease terminated. Even my college tuition payment was reversed, leaving me scrambling to defer the semester. I moved into Daniel's one-bedroom apartment with nothing but the clothes I'd been wearing and a backpack of essentials. Everything else remained at the manor, held hostage by my father's anger. The hardest part wasn't the missing luxuries, it was the public humiliation. My father told everyone in his social circle that I'd been led astray by an opportunist. He painted Daniel as a con artist and me as a naive fool. Former friends stopped returning my calls. My mother's bridge club whispered when I walked past. Daniel's apartment leaked when it rained. The heating was unreliable, ironic, given that's how we met. We shared one car, a beat-up truck that Daniel used for work. I got a job waitressing at a diner, my business degree worthless without my father's connections to open doors. Some nights I cried, overwhelmed by how completely my life had changed. Daniel would hold me and say, "It gets better. I promise it gets better." I wanted to believe him. But my father's words echoed constantly, "You chose poverty." And looking around our cramped apartment, working 12-hour shifts for tips while other girls from my prep school posted vacation photos online, it felt like maybe he was right. Then one night, as I helped Daniel review architectural plans on our second-hand laptop, he showed me something that changed everything. I applied for a city grant, Daniel explained, pulling up an email. For affordable housing development. It's a long shot, but if we win, it could fund 12 units. That's 12 families with safe homes. I studied the proposal he'd written, detailed plans for sustainable housing, community gardens, shared green spaces. It was brilliant work, thoughtful and innovative. Nothing like my father's developments, which prioritized profit margins over people. When will you hear back? I asked. 3 months maybe. Don't get your hopes up though. Competition's fierce. But hope was all we had. So we waited, working our jobs and building our life together piece by piece. I enrolled in online urban planning courses, paying tuition with tip money. Daniel took on extra consulting projects, designing renovations for homeowners who couldn't afford big firms. We were broke, but we were building something real. Something that mattered. 6 weeks later, Daniel got the call. He'd won the grant, not just for 12 units, but for an entire neighborhood development. 25 homes, a community center, and playgrounds. It was the break he'd been working toward for years. I cried, but this time from joy. The project transformed everything. Local news covered the groundbreaking ceremony, praising Daniel's innovative approach to affordable housing. His firm gained attention from city planners and activists. More grants followed, then private investments from people who believed in the mission. Within a year, Daniel went from struggling contractor to rising star in sustainable development. His phone rang constantly with opportunities. Magazines interviewed him about housing that heals communities. Universities invited him to speak. And through it all, I worked beside him, handling permits, managing budgets, coordinating with city officials. My business degree finally had purpose. My father had trained me to build empires, and now I was doing exactly that, just not the kind he'd envisioned. We moved into a better apartment. Bought a second car. Started saving for a real home of our own. The poverty my father promised never quite materialized, because we'd learned something he never understood: wealth isn't just money. It's purpose, partnership, and pride in your work. 3 years after my father disowned me, Daniel's firm won a regional innovation award. Standing on that stage as he thanked me publicly, calling me his partner in every sense, I felt richer than I ever had growing up in Warren Manor. Then everything changed again. 5 years after my father threw me out, his face appeared on the news, but not in his usual business triumph segments. Warren Developments was under federal investigation for construction violations, bribery allegations, and unsafe housing practices in low-income neighborhoods. I watched the coverage in our living room, coffee forgotten in my hands. They showed buildings my father had thrown up quickly and cheaply, walls cracking, foundations failing, families displaced. Everything he'd built on the backs of people who couldn't fight back was finally collapsing. Daniel came home to find me still staring at the television. "You okay?" "I don't know," I admitted. Part of me felt vindicated, this was karma catching up. But part of me still remembered being 6 years old, sitting on my father's shoulders, believing he was invincible. "He made his choices," Daniel said gently. "Just like we made ours." 2 weeks later, the city announced a massive urban renewal contract, billions of dollars to rebuild the neighborhoods my father's company had damaged. They were accepting development proposals from firms specializing in sustainable, ethical construction. Daniel looked at the announcement and then at me. "Should I bid?" I thought about it carefully. This wasn't revenge, this was justice. "Yes." "Bid." The pre-bid conference was held downtown in a ballroom full of developers, city officials, and press. Daniel and I arrived early, reviewing our proposal one last time. We'd spent weeks preparing detailed plans for rebuilding communities, not just structures. Green spaces, community input, affordable costs. Then I saw him. My father, across the room, gray hair perfectly styled, expensive suit immaculate, working the crowd like he always had. He looked older, more tired, but still carried himself like royalty among peasants. He hadn't noticed me yet. 5 years was a long time. I'd changed my style, cut my hair, lost the designer polish I'd grown up with. But then Daniel took my hand, and someone called his name loudly across the room. My father turned toward the sound. His eyes swept past me, then snapped back with recognition so sudden he actually stumbled. "Lily," he breathed. I straightened my spine and met his gaze. "Hello, father. Surprised I'm not dead after all?" The color drained from his face as he registered my words, his exact phrase from 5 years ago, thrown back at him in a room full of his peers. My father recovered quickly, he'd built a career on maintaining composure under pressure. "Lily, darling," he said, sliding into a warmer tone like changing masks. "I've been trying to reach you for years. Your mother misses you terribly." "Really?" "Because last I checked, my phone number hasn't changed." It was a lie, I'd changed it twice, but he didn't need to know that. He ignored my comment and turned his attention to Daniel, extending his hand like they'd never met. "Thomas Warren. You must be the famous Daniel Hayes. I've heard impressive things about your work." Daniel shook his hand briefly. "We've met actually. At your dinner table, before you threw us out." My father's smile tightened. "Ah yes. Well, water under the bridge. I'm sure we can all agree that time has proven interesting perspectives." He turned back to me. "You look well, Lily. Clearly, I underestimated your resilience." "You underestimated everything about me," I replied calmly. The conference began before he could respond, and we took seats on opposite sides of the room. But throughout the presentations, I felt his eyes on me, calculating, assessing, trying to figure out his next move. I knew that look. It meant he wanted something. 2 days later, my phone rang with an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Lily, it's your mother." Her voice was soft, almost pleading. "Your father wants to meet with Daniel. Business discussion. The renewal contract. He thinks Warren Developments and Hayes Design could collaborate." "Collaborate?" I repeated, my tone flat. Is that what we're calling it? Please, sweetheart. Things have been difficult. The investigations, the lawsuits. He needs this contract. She paused. We need it. I thought about the families living in crumbling buildings my father had constructed with cheap materials and cheaper ethics. I thought about the bribes he'd paid to inspectors, the corners he'd cut, the people he'd hurt. I'll talk to Daniel, I said finally. No promises. Daniel listened to my explanation that evening, his expression thoughtful. What do you want to do? He asked. I want to hear what he has to say. Not because I trust him, but because I want to look him in the eye when we win this contract on our own merit. Daniel nodded slowly. Then we'll take the meeting. But Lily, we do this on our terms. We met at a downtown restaurant, neutral territory. My father arrived with his lawyer, which told me everything about how he viewed this collaboration. We brought our attorney too, a sharp woman named Patricia who specialized in development contracts. My father ordered wine like we were celebrating, not negotiating. Daniel, Lily, I'll get straight to it. Warren Developments has the infrastructure, the connections, the city council relationships. You have the innovative designs and positive press. Together, we could dominate this contract. And what would that partnership look like? Daniel asked calmly. A merger of sorts. Your firm folds into mine, you maintain creative control, but we handle the heavy lifting. Money, permits, construction crews. He smiled. It's a perfect arrangement. So we provide the reputation you destroyed, and you provide the resources you're about to lose to federal investigation? I said. The smile faltered. The investigation will resolve itself. These things always do. Not this time, Patricia interjected quietly. She slid a folder across the table. We've reviewed the evidence. You've got at least 15 violations that won't disappear with your usual methods. My father's face hardened. You're making a mistake. You need me. Daniel shook his head. No, sir. We really don't. My father's mask finally cracked. Lily, be reasonable. This contract could save your family, our family. Your mother, your inheritance, everything I built. Everything you built on corruption, I corrected. Everything you built by hurting people who couldn't fight back. I don't want any part of that legacy. So this is revenge? I cut you off, and now you're punishing me? No, I said, and I meant it. This is consequence. There's a difference. You taught me that business is business, remember? Well, this is business. And your business practices don't meet our standards. He turned to Daniel, desperate now. Name your price. I'll make you a partner, 50-50 split. You'll be a millionaire overnight. I'd rather sleep at night, Daniel replied. We stood to leave. My father grabbed my arm, his grip tight. You were nothing before me, Lily. Nothing. Everything you have, every opportunity you've gotten, was because of my name. I gently removed his hand. You're wrong. Everything I have is despite your name. And that's something you'll never understand. As we walked out, I heard him shouting behind us, but the words didn't matter anymore. The contract bidding process took 3 months. During that time, I heard through mutual acquaintances that my father was unraveling. Warren Developments was hemorrhaging investors. The federal investigation was expanding. Several of his board members had resigned. Meanwhile, our proposal gained traction. City council members loved our community-focused approach. Environmental groups endorsed our sustainability plans. Most importantly, residents from the affected neighborhoods supported us. They'd lived in my father's buildings and wanted something better. The night before the final decision, my mother called again. He's drinking, she said quietly. Every night, just sitting in his study, drinking and looking at photos of when you were little. He won't admit it, but losing you broke something in him. He didn't lose me, I replied. He threw me away. I know. Her voice cracked. I should have stood up for you. I should have left with you that night. I'm sorry, Lily. It was the first time she'd ever apologized for anything. I didn't know what to say. Are you happy? She asked finally. I looked around our home, modest but warm, filled with photos of completed projects and families we'd helped. Daniel was in the kitchen making dinner, humming off-key. We'd built this life from nothing. Yes, I said honestly. I really am. The city council announced their decision on a Tuesday morning. Daniel and I sat in the conference room with our team, holding hands under the table as the chairwoman read the results. After careful consideration of all proposals, the city development contract for urban renewal is awarded to Hayes Design Company. The room erupted in applause. Our team hugged and cheered. Patricia pumped her fist in the air. Daniel pulled me close, and I felt tears streaming down my face, but this time, they were entirely from joy. We'd won. Not because of connections or bribes or family names. We'd won because our work was better, our ethics were stronger, and our vision was clearer. The chairwoman continued, we were particularly impressed by Hayes Design's community integration plans and commitment to sustainable building practices. This is the future of urban development. Later, at the press conference, reporters asked how it felt to beat out Warren Developments. Daniel handled the question gracefully. This isn't about beating anyone. It's about building something better for families who deserve safe, affordable homes. But one reporter directed a question at me specifically. Ms. Hayes, your father's company was also in the running. Any comment on competing against family? I took a deep breath. My father taught me that business is business. Today, the best business won. The news coverage was extensive. Business journals called it a changing of the guard in development circles. Social media celebrated it as David versus Goliath. And quietly, the federal investigation into Warren Developments concluded with multiple indictments. My father's company filed for bankruptcy 3 weeks after we won the contract. Warren Manor was listed for sale. His entire empire, built over 40 years, collapsed in months. Part of me expected to feel triumphant. Instead, I just felt sad for the man who'd had everything and thrown it away for pride. Then my mother called with an unexpected request. Your father wants to see you. Just the two of you. He's not doing well, Lily. I don't owe him anything, I said, but even as I spoke, I knew I would go. Not for him, for me. For closure. Daniel drove me to the small apartment where my parents were now living, a far cry from the manor. Want me to come up? He offered. No. This is something I need to do alone. The apartment was modest, clean, but clearly difficult for my mother to maintain without household staff. She answered the door, looking older and more tired than I remembered. Thank you for coming, she whispered, then pointed to a room down the hall. My father sat in a worn armchair by the window, staring at the parking lot below. He'd aged dramatically, his hair completely gray now, his face gaunt, his expensive suits replaced with casual clothes that didn't fit quite right. Lily, he said without turning. You came. Mom said you wanted to talk. I wanted to say. He stopped, struggling with words for maybe the first time in his life. I was wrong. The admission hung in the air between us. I waited, giving him space to continue. I told myself I was protecting you. That I knew better because I'd built an empire from nothing. He finally turned to face me. But I didn't build from nothing, I built on people I hurt. And then I hurt the one person who mattered most. You told me I was dead to you, I said quietly. At my wedding, in front of everyone I loved, you announced I was dead. I know. His voice broke. And you became more alive than I ever was. You built something real, something that helps people instead of exploiting them. Everything I spent 40 years creating is gone, and everything you built in 5 years is thriving. That's not irony, that's justice. I sat down across from him. Why now? Why apologize after all this time? Because I finally understand what I lost, my father said. Not the business, that was built on sand anyway. I lost my daughter. I lost watching you become this extraordinary woman. I missed your wedding, your achievements, your life. And for what? Pride? Money? My precious reputation? He reached into his pocket and pulled out a worn photograph, me at 6 years old, sitting on his shoulders at some company event, both of us laughing. I found this last week while packing. I remembered that day. You were so excited to come to work with Daddy. You thought I was a hero. I did, I admitted. You were everything to me. And I threw that away because Daniel didn't have the right resume. He shook his head. The stupidest decision of my life. We sat in silence for a moment. Finally, I asked the question I'd carried for 5 years. Did you ever love me? Or was I just another asset to manage? His eyes filled with tears. I loved you more than anything. But I showed it wrong, through control instead of trust, through providing things instead of presence. By the time I realized it, you were gone. You drove me away, I said. You chose your pride over your daughter. I did. And I've paid for that choice every single day since. I looked at this broken man, the father who'd once seemed invincible, now defeated by his own choices. I felt anger, sadness, and something unexpected, pity. I can't forgive you completely, I said honestly. Not yet. Maybe not ever. You hurt me too deeply. I understand. But I can tell you this, I don't hate you. And I hope you find some kind of peace. Do you think? He hesitated. Do you think we could start over? Not as we were, but as something new? I don't expect your trust or even your respect. Just, a chance to know you again? I thought about it carefully. Maybe. Slowly. But you'd have to accept Daniel, accept our life, accept that I'm not the daughter you tried to create. I accept all of that. I accept everything. Then we can try. But Father, one condition. You have to get help. Real help. For the drinking, the anger, all of it. He nodded. I've already started. Your mother insisted. I stood to leave, and he stood too. For a moment, we faced each other awkwardly. Then, tentatively, he opened his arms. I stepped forward, and we hugged, brief, uncomfortable, but genuine. I'm sorry, he whispered. I know. A year later, I stood in the center of Riverside Commons, the first completed neighborhood from our renewal contract. 25 homes painted in cheerful colors, surrounded by community gardens and playgrounds. Children played on swings Daniel had designed himself. Families gathered for a ribbon-cutting ceremony. My father stood at the edge of the crowd, clapping as the mayor praised our work. He'd attended every public event since we'd reconnected, always quiet, always in the background, never demanding attention. Therapy had changed him, or maybe loss had. Either way, he was different. My mother linked her arm through mine. He's proud of you, you know. He tells anyone who'll listen about his daughter the urban planner. That's growth, I suppose. Daniel found me after the ceremony, pulling me into a hug. The first of many, he said, gesturing at the neighborhood. You did this, Lily. You and your vision. We did this, I corrected. Together. My father approached hesitantly. It's beautiful. Everything a community should be. He looked at Daniel. You were right that day at dinner. You can't buy integrity. And Lily, you were right too, about wanting to help people, not just profit from them. As the sun set over Riverside Commons, I watched families move into their new homes, homes built with care, ethics, and genuine concern for the people who'd live there. This was my father's legacy redemption, and my own legacy beginning. He'd said I was dead to him when I chose love. But love was what brought me back to life, and taught him how to live again too.